Hey folks, welcome to Pro Football Ireland as we get closer and closer to the new NFL season. Delighted to be in the Aviva Stadium. Big shout out to the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. Hooking us up with that, Michael McQuaid, Mark Hogan with the two college boys, Armagh's finest, Dara Carragher, David Clifford's second cousin, Conall Diggin. Boys getting closer to the NFL season. Dara, I'll start with you, boss. How you getting on?
Sitting on the very best. Loving this nice scenic backdrop we have here of a empty Aviva Stadium. They're just firing up a few goalposts here for the first time in a year, so it should be an exciting weekend.
Should be good crack. Mr. Diggin, we're a long way from Tralee. We're not really, to be fair. What, 3 hours?
Probably about that, yeah. 3.5, 4.
Mark, how you doing? Good?
Nice to be back this side of the country. We've been all over the place now. I said I've been more places and you've been more places with me over the last 6 months than we have been with our partners.
At the start of the summer, I had never been to Cork or Limerick in my life, and now I can be like, yeah, I've done it, I've ticked it off, I'm finally getting around places. Bit of crack, doing an extra podcast with these two boys, and you can listen to the PFI College Football Show weekly on the podcast network. Obviously Mark here as well. We're going to have a bit of crack today because Mark's got an interesting stat. 50%, what was it again? Because I have...
Do you know what, it's so funny, we're going to look at on this podcast the teams that we reckon aren't going to go back to the playoffs, and we think it's going to be the same teams year in, year out. Well, if you look back over the last 5 years, it's literally 50% of teams on average do not go back. So if there's 14 teams going to the playoffs, we're going to name 7 that aren't going back, and it actually makes it... Because just think about it, the division champions themselves will not always be the same. That would be insane. So 7 aren't going back. Let's start naming them. And it was, it's a top heavy league, so it's not an easy one to do.
She's windy, boys. She's windy. Let's start off. Can I go first? Can I just be rude and jump in straight up? Let's just get the elephant out of the room right now. The New York Football Giants are not making the playoffs. Now, I am not being hateful. There's a lot of Giants fans in Ireland, and I respect that completely. But they overachieved last season. How they won that game against your boys in London, I know, and I'm not picking on you here. I'm just saying to this day I don't get it. And but that is the key thing. That was a masterclass of tactical work by Wink Martindale back in that day. And never mind the fact that the rest of the league had the rest of the season to try and figure it out, and they were getting to that point into the playoffs. The Giants had an unbelievable, in my opinion, a fantastic performance in Minnesota, and that cannot be taken apart. But I really feel that, okay, Daniel Jones had to be paid, fair enough. Is he worth it? That's a whole different conversation for a different podcast. I don't personally think he is. If I'm a Giants fan, I feel a wee bit let down at how Joe Shane and how they handle that whole thing with Saquon Barkley. I understand that there's a process. I think if Barkley had to come out onto a podcast and basically say all this sort of stuff, there's that. But genuinely, I don't think they're good enough. I don't think Daniel Jones is of the caliber to lead a team in the NFL to the playoffs. And there's that conversation of, well, the NFC's weaker. That doesn't matter. You're in a division with the Cowboys, who Prescott's playing for his career this year, never mind playing for Dallas, and the Eagles, who will be, if not in the Super Bowl, heavily going for it. I just feel that they're going to miss out by a couple of games at the end of it. And I think the most important thing being the Giants fans in New York could experience a year where the Jets are so full on with this whole Rodgers brigade, and it's only short term. Calm down. Keep her lit. You're grand. Just keep Brian Dable there for another couple of years. Do not go mad. Embrace the fact that he came in the first year and done what he done, and take it from there. I'm going to get hounded for this in January. I just know already I've said this.
Well, no, 888 Sport have them at 7 wins this year, so there is regression expected. We know that themselves. I think it's fair enough. I don't think Giants fans will appreciate it, but I absolutely think that they're the obvious ones. And does anyone else?
And that's not why I'm not being rude. Would you agree with it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're probably the team most set for regression this year out of them and the team I'm going to get to next probably.
But yeah, who has them? Who's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going there?
Oh, I was going completely different direction. I was going with the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, give me it.
I went Vikings. I think they're my first team for. I think they won't make the playoffs again. Look, it's a hot and heavy situation in the NFC North. There's the battle of mid, as it's being called.
Battle of mid.
Yeah, there isn't a whole pile of special teams, but I don't think the Vikings are head and shoulders above anyone in that division. I think they've lost key veterans, Thielen, Dalvin Cook, Eric Kendricks, and look, they can be replaced. There's young players there who can step up, but at the end of the day, they had a historically bad 13-win season last year. I believe they won 13 games. One score games and just narrowly edging over the line. I think if you replayed last season, 10 times over, I'd say they probably missed the playoffs 7 times out of 10, which is mad for a team that won 13 games. It's just it was just the variance of those victories. So look, they are my first team that I think won't make the playoffs. Granted the NFC isn't overly spectacular this year, or was it last year, but I think that teams like the Packers, the Lions will take that extra step up and just edge the Vikings out of that top spot in the NFC North, I hope.
Edge? I don't think it'd be an edge at all.
Prediction thing, because and that's I wanted to, and I'll ask, this is a free answer for anyone here. You know, if what Daire says happens and the Vikings don't make the playoffs, in the 1 year after Rodgers leaving that division, and the Vikings, who were so good to an extent last season where they got to the playoffs and Kirk Cousins performed at that level, do you think people can start going to be mad and start calling for O'Connell and like that whole process to stop? Or do you think it would just be that year where it's like, okay, we need to build a bit more and get back? Because again, that division, like, they couldn't be that far off.
Yeah, I mean, Kirk Cousins is sneakily 35 years old now. You don't really...
Sneakily.
He's edging up there in the year, so the regression's going to happen. It feels like the offense is Justin Jefferson on a dream at this point, you know, so which isn't the worst dream to have. But yeah, that's sort of where I'd stand in Minnesota.
What do you boys reckon?
I think, like, literally, I think you're a bit ahead of the curve and being like, would they be calling for O'Connell's head? Because to be honest, he's probably the only reason they were maybe as good as they were last year, because, you know, he's Sean Payton, or not Sean Payton guy, a Sean McVay guy, and he knows all the offense.
It's more though, like when people get annoyed, they get frustrated, and they'll think they will have thought whenever Rodgers left, this is our division. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and they are a team. I mean, this whole division is a team in transition, where you're like, oh, the Lions had such a great second half of last year, but then you're like, yeah, but some of that is a little bit unsustainable because the defense maybe isn't there right now, and then you're like, is the offense going to regress just a tiny bit? And if that offense regressed a tiny bit, it would kind of lead to a whole different situation for them. So it's just a division where, like, I have no clue what's going to happen, but I'm really, really looking forward to it, and I think Daire will have a bunch of fun covering it this year.
It was your wee crystal ball, Mark. Is Daire?
No, I'm spot on. Yeah, I think there's 3 easy ones in this exercise with the New York Jets, the Minnesota Vikings, and you want to talk about the Bucs.
Yeah, I have 2 teams, but like the Bucs is you can't say they're going to regress because they were already bad. Like, and that was with Tom Brady, but like Tom Brady was way past.
Oh,
like, yeah. You could see, like, he couldn't throw more than 15 yards. It was reminiscent of like a Peyton Manning last season type job, but with Peyton Manning in his last season, he probably had one of the best defenses of all time.
Yeah, and it carried him.
And if it wasn't for that team, you know, then Peyton Manning would be looking at and would be ending his career with 1 Super Bowl ring. It's as simple as that. But it'd be really interesting for the Buccaneers this year because their defense is largely intact. They didn't really lose anyone. Really, only Sean Murphy-Bunting is kind of the only starter who was lost from that team. And, you know, Vita Vea is one of the best in the league, one of the best defensive linemen in the league. They managed to keep Jamel Dean. I am a bit worried about Devin White because he's requested a trade. I don't know. It looks like they are just going to hold on to him and not try and trade him. Maybe unless it reaches the middle of the season, they have to let him go. But the offense for this team, outside of like the wide receiver and the offensive line, it's pretty much non-existent. We don't know what's going to happen. They don't have a real running back, and we have no clue who their quarterback's going to be. Even though I love Baker Mayfield, I don't know what's going on over there.
I think there's a when, where, and how are we going to preview the NFC South. But the one way that the Bucs can get there is because it is a wide open division. Now, I do think that the Saints and the Falcons are going to surprise people. But the belief with the Bucs seems to be on offense. Well, it's Chris Godwin and it's Mike Evans. So irregardless of the quarterback, but we don't know if it's Kyle Trask or is Baker Mayfield going to hang on till week 2, week 3, week 4. And they're going to hope, that's the belief, that he can just be the LA Rams quarterback that was there for a minute, that was playing for his career, really.
Against the Broncos. That,
yeah, the Bucs, I wouldn't give a chance to. Like, I think they're definitely top 5 picking in the draft next year, except for the division. They have one of the easiest schedules in the NFL.
And that's what makes it so hard. I mean, but nobody's mentioned Mike Evans. You know,
he I believe he has a stat where the first 10 or 11 years of his career he has over 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping like he can get over 1,000 yards again this year because it's just a really cool stat. Like, and I believe one year he went like 1,001 yards over. So he's just holding on to
like
it.
The typical week 18 stat. I suppose when you have an extra game as well, it'll help.
Yeah.
I mean, do you agree with the whole Bucks thing? I mean, I don't think they'll be as bad as top 5. And I know that sounds insane to say, but when you're in that division, there's so many question marks around those teams. It's hard to know. Like,
Yeah, I think. Well, I'm secretly hoping for Baker Mayfield to return to the guy he was in college and maybe his first year in Cleveland that we haven't really seen in a long time.
imagine.
Oh, he's
Just
an
get the
entertaining-
commercials back, hopefully.
Yeah. You could do one around here. Do
Big pirate ship in the back.
you want to go as Baker Mayfield down there? The seats there.
Oh God, Conall, I don't think you've given us a team yet, have you?
I was the Buccaneers. They're just such an interesting team, and I think they have actually a very, very early bye week this year. So like usually you want a bit of a later bye week in case if you were doing bad, you can usually flip it around after the bye week. But they have one, I believe, after their week 4 game. So in week 5 they have their bye week. So I'm wondering if that will maybe set them off, where if they get off to a bad start, they might not be able to fix it soon enough.
Fair enough. Let me jump on to my last one then. Chargers. I don't think the Chargers make the playoffs, which probably sounds mad because you give Justin Herbert that massive extension and you see how good that team is on both sides of the ball. I just feel this year. Now, I don't think the Broncos are going to be a good team in the AFC West at all. I don't think the Raiders are going to get to the playoffs either. But I feel like they'll be chipping away at that Chargers team in maybe like the 1 or 2 sort of games. And I feel like the Chargers may just not be to the level at which they need to be at to get to that coveted wild card spot in the AFC. I think there's too much going on in the AFC East. I think there's too much going on in the AFC North, and we'll do poll predictions, but that AFC North is on its head. Who's going to win that? I think for the first time in years, it's anybody's game. Excuse me, folks. I know we don't know what's going on with Cleveland, but the rest of it is a massive thing. So I think the Chargers could be in a wee bit of trouble. Now, I'm not saying they get to week 16, 17, 18 winning in scenario, but I feel like this could be the year where they miss out by a game or miss out on difference, and I think Staley has to go if that does happen, because you've paid Herbert. We've said on previous podcasts right here that Herbert now has that 2-year window where he's that rookie quarterback on the salary wise. It's put up or shut up. I picked him to go to the Super Bowl last year. I picked him to win the Super Bowl last year. Like, that's insane. And I'm now saying I don't think they're going to get to the playoffs. Am I insane? Someone tell me I'm insane, or someone tell me I'm not.
No, well, I mean, harboring on to the team that I was going to pick, it's a very similar situation, the Miami Dolphins.
Okay.
I know we're flying through teams here.
Oh, the Dolphins missing the playoffs, man.
I think both the Dolphins and the Chargers aren't bad teams. If they were in the NFC, they're probably competing for a 1 seed. It's just one of the biggest imbalances we've seen between the two conferences in a long, long time, where, there's just a major lack of good teams in the NFC this year. So I think, I was going to say the Dolphins because, you're in a division that already has 2 teams who fancy themselves as Super Bowl contenders, the Jets and Bills. We don't know what the Patriots are going to bring, but they're usually good for a win over Miami each year. And then you're thinking, they have to go, I think 2 of their NFC games, they play the NFC East, which means they're going to have to go on the road to Philly. That's another tough game. And the big thing with Miami, we spoke of on another podcast, was they've got a new defensive coordinator, and I know with all the experience that comes with Vic Fangio, the point remains that they don't have time for teething problems this year, because they don't have time to throw away, start out 0-2, because wins are so pivotal in the AFC this year. It's just an absolutely stacked conference.
Well, it's massive because you've got the Bills playing the Jets week 1 of the season, and Miami will want to sort of go on that. So we said Miami, we said Chargers. You boys want to jump in?
I'm kind of looking at them because we are ramping up to. Look, I said there's 7 teams don't get back. Look, someone obviously has to go from the NFC because it is the easier side, but they are getting more difficult. So I'll give you an NFC one that I'm not going to say that I completely believe in it, but for the purpose of this exercise, I can see how it's not going to be a perfect, swimmingly great year for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to bring Daire unknowingly in on this for a little bit because I think it hinges nothing to do with the defense. They were lucky to keep Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator. It's an absolutely stacked defense. But when you look at the offense, Kellen Moore, whether scapegoated or power play or whatever it was, Mike McCarthy is back in charge of the offense. He's going to be play calling. He comes out at the end of the season and absolutely does Kellen Moore and says, Kellen Moore runs an offense that he's trying to put up as many points on the board as he can. I don't want to do that. I want to look after. He goes, I want to look after the ball. I want to run the ball and keep my defense off the field for as long as I can. Dara, when was the Green Bay Packers a run first team? Because I don't know where it was. And
I mean, the last 2 or 3 years of McCarthy in Green Bay was just people shouting at giving the ball to Aaron Jones while he sat on the sideline and he would have about 4 carries for 40 yards every game, and that would just be it, you know.
so when you look at it this year, the way they've set up their running back room is they have Tony Pollard now. They chose over Zeke. Tony Pollard passes the eyeball test when he's on the field, but there's a story that did the rounds. I think I picked it up in The Athletic that he removed himself after a 133-yard performance through 3 quarters because he said, I can't keep going in there. So I went looking through his carries. He had, on average, 12 carries a game last season. Zeke had 15. So they really were balancing it. So if you look at who is in the room with them, it's a guy that they picked up, an undrafted free agent from 2020 that's a special teamer, or you have Deuce Vaughn that I know people are popular, or he's a popular name at the moment.
Deuce Vaughn.
But and he's 5'5". Now Darren Sproles is a good 5'5" running back as well. But he does get the Dallas Cowboys pop because when you play for the Dallas Cowboys, Deuce Vaughn just becomes a name because he's whatever it was, a 3rd rounder. But you're expecting him to go in and fill in. Look, Ezekiel Elliott did obviously get a lot of slander last year, and maybe some of it was rightfully so. But you're expecting Deuce Vaughn to just go in and fill up those other 15 carries because Tony Pollard has not proved that he can do it. And I remember putting up a graphic last year and someone commented straight away when I sided with prioritizing Tony Pollard as your back going forward, and it was, but we haven't seen him prove it. And if he can prove it, that could be the undoing of them, because then you're just going against the wide receivers. Now they did get wide receiver help in the 30-year-old Brandon Cooks that's still knocking around, and he is still fast. CeeDee Lamb then can operate better out of the slot. We obviously have to see how they replace the tight end. I think they did get Luke Schoonmaker in the second round. So there's a lot there that still has to play out for Dallas that we are not certain about. Dak Prescott, it isn't as bad as people go on and on about. He's very safe with the ball. He makes great reads.
Kellen Moore doesn't seem to be very impressive.
Pardon me?
Kellen Moore seems to be.
Kellen Moore, yeah, 100%. But the defense should be great, but Dallas needs to show it before I can just buy into it, because Mike McCarthy is the problem, really. We know that from past years.
Have we hit 7? Have we hit on?
No, we have 2 more to go.
2 more? Right. I think I've picked both. I said the Chargers and the Giants.
Yeah, I actually have a bit of a surprising one. I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think that maybe I'm kind of along the same lines as Mark, where he's like, I don't fully believe it, but I can see a path to it happening. Basically, the idea behind it is last year they started off, I believe,
shocking.
They started off 3-7, and then they ended the season 6-1, and then they had the amazing comeback in the playoffs against the Chargers, who, that kind of gives more credence, I guess, to your idea that they're not going to make the playoffs because they just can't perform when they need to. But you look at this team and they really haven't added anyone, and I think the offense will be pretty good, even though Trevor Lawrence is a little bit turnover prone. He had 8 interceptions last year, which I think is actually all right, but he had 9 lost fumbles and 12 fumbles in total, and he had he fumbled 4 times and lost 4 fumbles against the Philadelphia Eagles last year. Now that's a Philadelphia Eagles defense that was one of the best in the NFL, but it's a really interesting team because they were a bit weak on defense last year. Now their numbers might not say that, but you take into account they got to play the Texans twice, they got to play the Colts twice, they also played the Jets late in the season, like some really, really bad defense or offenses, which will kind of help bring down your numbers. Don't have much depth at cornerback. I like their pass rush if Trayvon Walker can, take a step from what we hoped he would be as the first overall pick last year. I'm just not. I can't be fully convinced by them simply because of, they have a bit of an improved schedule since they reached the playoffs.
Tell you what, I think God, if whoever's up there is a Jags fan, because whenever you were talking, the wind was mad. You might even hear it. The really key thing here, and I keep blabbering on about this on each podcast. The Jags are going to have the first time ever a team's abroad for 2 weeks. Really? And that could be massive in their schedule, because if they can, they're playing. They have a home game in Wembley, then they have the Bills game. Right, so that hasn't happened before. Usually you go in, if you're there for a week or whatever, you go out, or if you're like Matt LaFleur, you're like, we're tired. Ask whatever questions.
Just
you
in
want.
no mood to
oh my God,
communicate.
But and I've said this in a few podcasts now, Mark. I mean, if the Jags go in and beat Atlanta, I at the minute now, 2 months out, I say, well, I reckon the Jags win that game. They're in there. They're acclimatized. They go in a neutral enough. I mean, it'll be busy enough with Bills fans that day. But I mean, Colin said, if they go on a bit of a run, you'd expect now, and you're bang on. The excuse needs to start. Lawrence needs to take it to the next level this year. So it would be stunning if they'd make the playoffs, I think.
Lawrence looks like he's set up for a massive, like, he wants to become one of those elite quarterbacks. Like, he obviously came into the league like that, and then he kind of started to show it now that he had some weapons last year. So
and he had a real head coach.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. And I don't think it'd be understated. Like, Doug Peterson was brought in as this guy that's really good with quarterbacks, and he delivered. So, like, again, someone has to do that. You do see that Tennessee is kind of like, no, actually, you know, we can compete in this division. That's the way they got DeAndre Hopkins, even though people were saying they could be the first or second overall pick in the draft. I suppose you don't know an outlier like Anthony Richardson. What could he be so crazy that it's such a wide open division that I have the Jags absolutely winning it, but that's the NFL for you. We don't know.
We'll see. Adam, you want to add? Are you
No,
think we covered it?
I have
the last team that we have.
Oh, sorry. In case, because I saved one until last. I think makes sense. I don't want to make this an AFC South preview, but an AFC North preview. But that AFC North, I think, has gone so competitive that the Cincinnati Bengals need to really cross the T's and dot the I's if they're to go back to the playoffs, because
massive call.
See, look, the division champs don't always say the same. Like, literally, it has never happened probably, and someone has to miss out. I don't think it's Kansas City. I think the Jags have the AFC South. The Bills obviously have the competition, but when you look at that AFC North, it's absolutely like they just about got across the line when you saw last year. They would have had an equal record, even though they had the division sewn up, against Baltimore in Week 18 last year when they obviously didn't have to play their starters. It would have been the coin toss game, obviously, if they had lost it. So they just about, when they played last year, and this is a crazy stat that they never played the same quarterback within the division last year. So their losses they lost to Mitchell Trubisky when Joe Burrow way out threw him, but then had 4 interceptions. They lost to Jacoby Brissett, and they lost when they played Lamar Jackson. They lost him with Justin Tucker in an excellent game, and must be said. And then their wins came against Deshaun Watson back 2 games. In fairness, they did hockey Pickett and the Steelers. That's fair enough. 5 games into his career, you could say, might be a slight. And then the Week 18 game, you wouldn't even count it. So that division was like, even the Steelers got up to 9-7 wins last year. So it was already competitive, and they had it their way. And we're saying now that the Cleveland Browns have sorted their defense. You can throw in the Steelers. We hope to see that offense in year 2 of Kyle Pitts. And then the Ravens, if that passing attack works out for them. So I think it's a super competitive division, and they just can't rest on it.
It's interesting. I wanted to end this, and I think we could talk about that for 20 minutes, but I wanted to end
I think we might, in one of our upcoming live shows, I think we're going to talk AFC because it deserves it, and I think hopefully we'll be able to podcast it, because I think you could write a book on it at the moment.
Hopefully, we should be able to podcast it. I'll make sure it happens, don't worry. That being said, I wanted to end, last 2 minutes here, I want a bold prediction from each of you lads, and Mark has stole my thunder. I have the Steelers winning the AFC North, I think. And look, before everyone goes, sure, you do, and you're biased and all this sort of stuff. Maybe I'm just starting to buy into it. Maybe I'm a believer. But if you look, you said it yourself, 9 wins. Kenny Pickett coming in the stack, and they looked. I know it's a preseason, so don't start laughing. They looked unbelievable overnight against the Bills. Deontay Johnson didn't have a passing or a receiving touchdown last year. He has to have a big year. George Pickens is going to go to the next level. Never talk about that defense. I just have a feeling if Pittsburgh can get off to a good start to get the Niners Week 1, who knows what can happen. That's my bold prediction. The other one for me is I have the Jets winning the Super Bowl. I have Aaron Rodgers winning the Super Bowl and retiring within 48 hours. I think
really buy
the
the hype, don't you?
I know. I'll tell you why I buy the hype, because Robert Saleh stood in that lecture theatre, and I was like, "Come on!" They got there. It was unreal. I am not going to talk to you for 6 months if he wins it again. I'm sure it's like Brady, and
I'll be sort of happy. It'll be bittersweet. Bold predictions. I've got a weird one, but there's 4 top edge rushers in the NFL right now. I think everyone's pretty clear on it. It's Garrett, Watt, Bosa, and Micah Parsons. I think one of them is going to become head and shoulders apart from the rest. I think we haven't had, since maybe JJ Watt, we haven't had a clear-cut number 1 edge rusher. I think that happens this year. You can make an argument for any of them.
The argument, like literally this is what I'm talking about with the Browns defense. No one was double teaming more in the league last year than Myles Garrett because he had no other help there. Then they went out and they got guys. So it's like, I think Myles Garrett is going to be a massive year.
For TJ Watt, he's had a year off to recover now, and goodness knows he had plenty of hits through his year. Hopefully he's back fully the man he was before he got injured. Time is on Parsons' side. He's the youngest, and he's got the least edge rushing reps in his career out of all of them. And then I in my opinion, Nick Bosa is slightly just above the rest.
I worry about him with Steve Wilkes' defense. Yeah. I think that's the slide on him.
Is yours a Raiders winning the AFC West or what?
I would rather walk out of here before I choose the Raiders winning anything, let alone the AFC West. No, my prediction is I actually think, I said it to you when we were at the flag football the last day, I think it's going to be that the Atlanta Falcons not only win the NFC South, but that they reach the second round in the playoffs. Because I'm a massive believer in this team. I think that this offense, the passing offense maybe isn't going to blow you away, but this rushing offense, I'm so intrigued by it, because they have Bijan Robinson, they have Tyler Algier just to pick up 2 or 3 yards. He'll pretty much do that every play. Good blocker as well. And then Cordero Patterson to be like a Swiss Army knife. He can play wide receiver, he can do kickoff return, he can do running back, he can do pretty much everything. And offensive line that I think actually goes really underrated, like Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry, Jake Matthews, and they brought him in a new guy, Matthew Bergeron. And then the defense has some really good young pieces. They added Jesse Bates. They have one of the best probably top 5 cornerbacks in the NFL in AJ Terrell. And I want people to look out actually for their middle linebacker. He was drafted last year, didn't have a great year because he's getting basically used to a new position. This is Trey Anderson. He went to Montana State. He played quarterback, running back, and linebacker, and he tested absolutely off the charts. Came into the league as a linebacker, and I believe he has the green dot actually for them, that's insane. He's basically gone from offense to defense, and people are saying in training camp that he's going to blow everyone away this year.
I'm loving it, boys. Mark, take us home.
Michael, has it been released yet, the Phoebe Schechter? When one of my ball predictions is the Cardinals go 0-17,
and for people, you're a Cardinals fan, just
Yeah, no, maybe that's part of it that I'm so negative about it. But they have gone. Drew Petzing is coming in as the offensive coordinator. He has spent the last 3 years with the Cleveland Browns quarterbacks room. It's like, wait, what was that a prestigious role to have? I don't know what they're going to do, except for if Kyler Murray can force his way onto the field, because they won't want him there because they're trying to tank. Clearly, he's playing for a job somewhere else, it seems, because they're wanting to trade him because they're going to be selecting quarterback. All signs point to it.
Do you think next year, if you do go 1-17 or have the first overall pick, pick a quarterback?
Yeah, I think they could go Williams, because it's the whole thing when you bring in a new head coaching staff and new GM, they always want their guy, right? So I like Murray, but it's a whole different offense. He was brought in for Cliff Kingsbury and that didn't work. They have so much work to do. So I think that there's a genuine chance of an 0-17 Cardinals team, 20-1 on 888 Sports. And then the final one for me is Sam Darnold is going to be the quarterback.
I actually like that.
For the playoffs, come playoff time.
I actually really like that.
I think that's what
playing the Jets in the Super Bowl.
So the thing,
yes.
Oh my God. So for me,
winning.
For me, it's like it is the whole thing that when you have Kyle Shanahan. So when you actually look at it, I cannot think now in year one when it was Todd Bowles was the head coach. I can't think of who the offensive coordinator was. After that, for 2 years, he had Adam Gaze. After that, then he had Matt Rule, and then last year he had Matt Rule and Ben McAdoo. Not one of those names is still involved with the NFL. When you put in a guy like Kyle Shanahan that just needs a system quarterback, I can't see the reason for why Brock Purdy gets knocked out of a game apart from the bad luck that San Francisco has had, and that's why they've put a barricade in front of the door now for how many quarterbacks they have in that. I don't think Trey Lance, we already know that the story, it seems that Trey Lance is going to be quarterback 3, and hopefully he won't get traded now or whatever, but I think that Brock Purdy will be given the start to begin with. I think the one thing that Brock Purdy has in his favour, you're talking about testing, he was insanely smart, and his coaches said after the draft last year, it was always obvious that he's one of those guys that's very cerebral and should be a good quarterback, so in a good quarterback system like Kyle Shanahan. But when you have Sam Darnold, I just think that he obviously has the athleticism and the experience to be able to take over that San Francisco offense. And I was reading the whole John Montana, Steve Young, I was reading a book on it this offseason, and it's I know why people are getting the comparisons, because it is the whole story replaying itself in San Francisco once more.
Time will tell. I'm not going to ask you for Super Bowl picks. We'll do that at a different point. I will say, I want to say this on camera, I'd love to, you talked about the draft there for the Cardinals, I'd love to, for the college lads at least, and maybe a few other boys, I'd love to go live for round 1 in person next year. We'll see what we can do. We'll try and book our videographer.
Production
Matthew.
meeting happening in
Big thanks to Matthew as well. But it's probably the last time we're all probably going to be together anyway until that. We're all going to the CFB playoff in New Orleans in January apparently. This is the crack. So appreciate everyone watching this. Massive thanks to the Aer Lingus College Football Classic and the Aviva for letting us film here. Boys, great crack. Appreciate and things that people won't think about. Appreciate you boys travelling down. Mark, appreciate you coming from work because you work in Dublin. And yeah, look, it's been great crack. We're buzzing for this season. ProFootball.ie, at NFL Ireland on all socials. Big thanks to 88 Sport, and we will chat to you soon. Go be a mugger.